Hello everybody, we're finally back at it again. First of all, I would like to apologize for the big gap between my videos. But I'm back, and I'm gonna try to keep up my schedule again. As any Battlefront 2 player can probably tell you, Battlefront is a huge game, with many game modes and therefore many different kinds of players. I consider myself to be a generalist player. I play pretty much every game mode and every character. Because I play a lot, I'm good at pretty much everything in this game. But because I don't specialize in anything, I'm not the best. But today we are talking about being the best. Because today we are covering how to get good at 1v1 duels between two pros. And to help me out with this, I asked pro dueler and top player in his own battling community, MilkyBoy10, for some tips and tricks. Needless to say, if you want to be a pro dueler, you need to know the basics. If you're not too confident in your dueling capabilities, I would recommend going back to my first dueling guide, or get some more practice before returning to this video. But now, without any further ado, let's get into some tips and tricks. First of all, I said this in my old guide, but it's especially important now. If you take damage and your opponent did not, get out of there and regen before going in again. You can be however skilled you want. If you don't take the time to regen in between and you keep getting hit, you're gonna die eventually. If there's one thing I had to learn the hard way while dueling against Milky, it's the fact that my standard way of dealing damage, being attacking in the back, does not work against him. In fact, it actually backfired, because he did a trick I will be referring to as the back parry. You can perform a back parry by simply turning around right as your opponent dashes past you and then parrying his incoming attack. It sounds really simple, but getting the timing down can be pretty difficult. But if your opponent doesn't know the counter for this move, you can actually follow it up with a second strike, making it a double back parry. Speaking about that counter, if your opponent knows the back parry, you can actually dash behind them, turn around and wait until they attempt their parry, and then parry their attack. And if your opponent was greedy and went for the double back parry, you can actually double parry back for devastating damage. So now we have a new way of dealing damage. But if this is the only method of attack you have, your opponent will just stop attacking as soon as he takes some damage. So if your opponent is playing smart, you will still have to get past their block the old-fashioned way. You can either use more complex dash strategies you will have to come up with on the spot. One of the attacks I will show you in a little bit. Draw out their attack so you can counter again, or combo with abilities to deal damage. Drawing out an attack can be done by hitting your opponent's block once. He will try to counter and probably fail, and then you can counter his attack. Another way of getting past block is running up to your opponent, jumping just over him, turning around in midair and striking behind you. However, this is a high risk strategy, because while you're in the air, you're really vulnerable. So don't use this ability too often, because when you get predictable, your opponent will easily be able to counterattack. Now that we're on the topic of jumping and attacking, let's cover a basic jump attack. If your opponent is trying to get away from you by jumping, you can get some easy mid-air hits by simply jumping up right as they are coming down and swinging when they're still just above you. Now that that's out of the way, let's get on with some hero-specific tips and tricks. Both Luke and Kylo have abilities that can be used in midair. These abilities can be used in combination with the jump over attack I showed you just a minute ago. By performing this trick you can get an easy knockdown or freeze, but it has all the same drawbacks as the normal jump over attack. Luke, Yoda and Maul can get some knockdowns by combining their rush, dash and spin attack with their forced chokes and pushes. Luke can also do this trick with repulse, but because of the slow animation, it's not as useful against pros, but a lot easier to pull off and still highly effective against noobs. Both of these moves can be blocked by quickly turning around, or avoided by dashing to the side. However, this can be really difficult if your opponent has better timing. Next, let's talk about Rey's dash strike and Obi-Wan's defensive rush. Both are great abilities for dealing some damage and regaining your stamina mid-fight. However, they have one big drawback. While in their abilities, Rey and Obi-Wan are vulnerable to knockdown abilities. If your opponent uses one of these abilities, you can simply knock them down and get some free hits for an easy counter. If you are playing one of these characters yourself, I recommend using these abilities in small bursts, so your opponent doesn't get time to react. Or you can combine them with their respective mind tricks to get in some safe hits. If you are playing as Grievous, then first of all, what are you doing? That's way too easy. And second of all, Grievous can combine any dash strategy with his thrust surge to quickly get in close and get a hit off. If your opponent is swing spamming and you're running out of stamina, you can simply activate Unrelenting Advance, although I don't recommend using it over long stretches of time. And if you need to deal damage quick, there's no ability in the game better than Claw Rush. To get an easy hit with Claw Rush, you simply need to dash behind your opponent, turn around and activate Claw Rush. That's all there is to it. Right now, Grievous is just way too broken. If you're facing Grievous, however, it's a whole another story. Blocking Thrust Surge basically works the same as blocking any other attack from any hero. Nothing special there. If your opponent is using Unrelenting Advance, just don't attack from the front. Attack from behind or use abilities. This way you can deal some easy chip damage to an almost immobile Grievous. If your opponent is using Claw Rush, however, you need to get out of there. You can block the ability, but the hitbox is so weird that it tends to clip through your block. Staying away is the best survival strategy. Speaking about survival strategies, many players don't know this, but Yoda's presence ability actually has a secondary effect. Next to giving you a health buff, it's also capable of breaking you out of choke and freeze. This messes up your opponent's timing, meaning they won't be able to combo attack. And if you get thrown by Maul or Kylo, you can also cancel out your velocity. This way you can avoid being thrown off the map. And while we're on the topic of Maul throwing things, Maul and Vader's lightsaber throw can be used in between normal attacks to increase your damage and stall your opponent's health regen. And now let's finish off the character specific tips with the two ability combos of the broken one. Well, let's keep the first one quick. Who doesn't know the ability loop of Anakin Skywalker? First you use your pool, then you use Heroic Might, and you finish it off with a Passionate Strike for massive damage. Vader's ability combo isn't as well known however, but it's still just as deadly. If you catch your opponent in a choke, you can jump forward right as he falls out of the choke and hit him in midair, then immediately turn around and throw your lightsaber for massive damage. This combo takes some practice, but once you have mastered it, you can take out over half of your opponent's health just by landing one choke. For one final tip, keep a close eye on your stamina bar, because if you don't notice it running out, you will probably take a lot of damage. And that's all for today. A special thanks again to Milky Boy 10, and I also need to thank SSJ Daddy and Uworne for helping us record this video. If you want some private tutoring, hit me up on PlayStation. And if you want to duel either me or Milky Boy, both our account names will be on screen. But with that said, that's it for today everybody. Thanks for watching.
Powerful than any Jedi.
It's dangerous. Close by.
Ignorance of the Force.
Could have been something special, too bad.